Answers with Dr. Reju is a platform where we take a more in-depth and intentional look into various life issues and bring clarification so we can navigate our way through with knowledge. Join us on Patrice Radio as we take this journey to discovery. Do remember to follow, like, and engage us on Instagram at Patrice_radio and also on YouTube via Patrice Radio Live. Thank you.
Better Nigeria. Is it a myth or do we keep hoping?
Nigeria is a highly religious country. How come corruption thrives?
Why is adoption not encouraged in Nigeria?
Is there a future for the Nigerian youth?
Being rich and famous, is that the only drive to be an artist?
What makes a great nation? Is it the leaders? What about the people?
This is Answers with Dr. Reju. Hi, my name is Onari. And this is Answers with Dr. Reju, where critical life issues are clarified. You're welcome to another episode on this vital series we have been on the family. I have in the studio Dr. Reju.
Thank you,
Good to have you. Obi Brown.
Thanks, Honore.
It's good to have you. And for the first time, Matthew Okwe decided to join us today. It's good to have you. We are so excited to have Matthew here. Now, from our last episode, we tried to identify those core values of family. What are those core values? If you can probably tell us again, core values family should sort of revert back to in this day.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that good question, because it's necessary we really, stay on that and make sure it is properly defined and well articulated.
Absolutely.
Now, when you call values core, it basically means that these things are fundamental. Without them being there, you can't have well-rounded families. And if there are no well-rounded families, you don't have a well-rounded society. Those core values are really ingrained. Like I said last week, it's not something you can list, but at least you can identify them as some vital building blocks. Some things that human beings need to operate with for them to be accurately human. For instance, values such as, hard work. It's not something you sit a child in a class, but it's something you expose the child to. And then it also comes with those on-the-spot clarifications and explanations. Take it to, a child growing up and you have daily chores at home, right? That's where that child begins to learn the value of hard work, that nothing good comes, without you putting in effort. Work is not a punishment. You are not subjected to it because somebody hits you. Is what really makes you human. You don't want to argue yourself out of it. And when you are not in it, there are punitive measures. Punitive not because you are being punished for being hated, but that you are not living the way you ought to live. So hard work is one of those building blocks, and that follows the man or the woman into life. The reason you get a job is that you want to work. And being paid for a job is not, it shouldn't come because you have not worked. Because in society, we have such, arguments about, so workers go on strike and they still want to earn salary. If somebody has been taught from the cradle about the value of hard work, that if you don't work, you don't eat. But, nobody talks about work. They just want to make it because we have not been taught. And then there's the place of sacrifice, right? Where you are taught to always look at the interests of others primarily before yours. That's critical. A society that is not based on the value of sacrifice, there is no way that society can have commonwealth, because everybody goes there to just peck on it. We just want to take how much we can take for ourselves. Everybody will not be like you. But at every point in time, you will meet people who are different from you, but there's always a point of contact. So those things are very critical. And then from childhood, if people are not taught the place of money, right? How to get it, right? How to disburse it, the purpose of it, the values of, growing up, you have piggy banks, right? You have piggy
I
banks.
doubt that still exists now.
You know,
It can come back.
we didn't
should
have
come
piggy
back.
banks in my, piggy banks is what we read from comics and TV.
yeah.
But we have safe.
Safe
Call it
box, yeah,
safe.
those wooden ones, yeah.
You know that
ones, yeah.
it is not every time an uncle or father's friend come to the house and gives you money that you go and buy Nico. I don't know whether this happens. You know.
Or even sweets.
Or
you know?
sweet or
Yeah,
all those kind of
something.
things, candy and chocolate. Whatever they give you, you keep something back. There's something. So at the end of the year, when we shake it, that's how people are taught on how to make, how to create wealth. You know, because look at it on a national scale today.
Yeah.
Ministries they must spend every allocation. Is because we have forgotten about piggy banks, about safe, and those safes, God protect you if you break it. It's a crime. If you break that thing before the time, you are finished. At least in my family, because you put those, this, maybe many of you won't know this coin, this kobo that has hole. Maybe many of you.
No, I didn't make it.
You didn't make that. So you put it in there. You put it in there, and then you cannot break it.
In my generation, we have already found ourselves in a society where we don't even know how to benchmark hard work, sacrifice. So, for instance, what I would call hard work here, when I go to South Korea, they may look at me as a very lazy person.
Lazy, yeah.
So, honestly, can we benchmark these things? Can we look at examples, you know?
When I was growing up, my parents, at least my father, he was an educationist. So we're not farmers, right? So, but we had neighbors who were farmers. My parents would make sure we follow those guys to the farm, right? My parents didn't have a farm. My mom was a business person, had a bakery, had a hotel, had all those kind of things. But, that you walk 3 hours, you trek 3 hours to get to that farm. And when you get there, you walk, right? You tend, you water, and then when you're coming back home, you bring firewood. Now, we didn't see that as fun. It was fun for us.
Even the walk.
I'm telling you, by the time you get home, honestly, there's no time for misbehavior.
You're so exhausted.
You are so exhausted.
Are you limiting this work now to physical labor?
Physical, first of all.
Okay.
Physical, especially while growing up, before you can begin to do mental work. You need to learn the physical. You see, the principle in that is that you know that for every reward, there must have been an input. But here, somebody just want to grow up and go and live in Abuja and get free money. It's a recipe for a society that is directionless. I'm not saying people should trek to farm. Now you can get a truck. But you see, if you are still in farming, it is still hard work. Even when you now get into white collar, blue collar, and all these kind of things, the principle remains the same. When you now begin to hear the narrative of society, thank God it's Friday, is unfortunate. What is the mind behind thank God it's Friday? I'm going to rest. It can be positive. It can also be negative. That when it's Monday, you can't wait for Friday. That's a lazy culture. And you see, you spoke about the Asian culture. In South Korea that you mentioned, the economy of that country was built on manual labor. They manualized their labor, if I'm allowed to say, into technology. They build their roads themselves. When you work hard, in my context in those days, they ask you, have you ever been to Germany? Yeah. I had a friend who studied in Germany. He said he was working I think he worked in a bank. He said to go on break, you sit on your swivel chair and you turn right, have lunch and turn back and continue to work.
Wow.
It's unfortunate that in Africa now, especially in Nigeria, we have not come to a place where we value labor. So people look at, I'm selling oranges, I'm selling pineapple, and you see this look on there because everybody wants to put on tie and sit in an air-conditioned office. It's destructive. But what happened right from the family we have de-emphasized that. So people need to understand these kind of things. But, you can't learn it by the time you're 15, 16, 17. Psychologists say that whatever you have not learned at age 14 is almost impossible for you to learn it again. So where for example, we had a discussion in our school. One parent said, why are we buying, a washing machine? Why can't they wash, themselves? I said, there are times when those things are necessary. If you have not taught the child that you are bringing to the boarding school at age 11 of how to wash pants, how to wash socks, how to do all those kind of things, don't expect us, because here, this is not a washing machine. This is not a it's not a laundry institute. This is not a laundry institute. I'd rather have them play football, to unwind, rather than going to wash clothes. They must have been taught those things, because what the school does is to continue from where you left off. If some things are not learned from home, it becomes difficult, and these kids can't add value. Maybe by the time we talk about parenting, we really anchor on this particular thing. But those values they are universal: hard work, sacrifice, accurate identity that recognize the difference of others, and then the place of money. Because what really destroys, especially in Africa today, we don't know how to place money. We believe the way to make money is to cheat people out. But those things are connected because they are from the same root. If you don't understand sacrifice, you can't save. Right? If you don't understand hard work, you cannot defer gratification, which is what we have about savings. And then, civilization is being able to enter the world of those who are different from you, and you can still hold your own. Right? Yeah. Knowing that everybody brings something to the table which makes all of us better.
Absolutely. Okay.
Well, Dr. Reju, you've been talking about the primary role of the family to actually inculcate these values, especially in the kids. Yeah. But I'm also, looking at it from another perspective where, we also have, like you mentioned, in the previous episode about a secondary family.
Yeah.
Now, if there's no connection between what is being, inculcated in these kids from home, with what is being, dished out to them in school, don't you think there's going to be like an anticlimax? There's going to be,
like a disconnect.
Yes.
Like they begin. What parents do to kids is to give them perspective. Is to give them, so to say, a lens through which they interpret every other thing in life. Is foundational. So whatever they see outside, there is a way they interpret it. The tool of interpretation is what they have been taught from home. Right? And the parents too have told them, whatever you have not heard from me is subject to more scrutiny. Right? Whatever agrees with what I've told you is correct. Is correct. So that's why that's so foundational. Many go to these secondary families without that solid foundation. So it's like a house without doors and windows. Right? It's like a house without, so anything can come in and anything can go out. So, but when you have this solid foundation, when you go out, everything that comes, there is a particular standard to measure it.
Okay.
So there is a continuation. So, but most times, parents are not aware when they are training kids about these things. They are not aware of because the whole essence is, what is this person going to add to society? Right? That's the reason why we ask, why grooming people? There's always that foresight. What are you going to become in life? If you're going to be a doctor, for instance, that determines you can't focus on history while you're in school. So the parents need to have that foresight. They need to have where these kids are going and what they are likely to meet. That determines what you put inside of them. So that there won't be a disconnect. Because when they get out there, the reality is the world out there wants to redefine what they've learned. But if those things have seated, they've seen the benefit of it, right? They've seen the reward of being obedient to those kind of things. They've seen the punishment of not being obedient to it. They are made for that word. So what that word can only do is to build on it. If the family have done the right thing, there's nothing out there that can actually, the pressure might be much, but this guy comes back home, there's a debrief.
Okay.
He comes back home, and I said something last week that it's unfortunate now that schools are no longer what schools used to be. Teachers that are there that just, they're just jobbers. They just look for a job. It's not a calling. It's not something they are committed to. Because we have a philosophy in our school. We tell parents, it is not our responsibility to educate your children. It is yours. You just delegate it to us. So if we call a parent-teachers conference and you are not there, there is a heavy punishment. It is the responsibility of parents to educate their kids, even up to tertiary level. That's why you pay for it. People don't really live family.
Yeah.
They don't live family.
I mean, just remembering, but when I was in secondary school,
Yeah.
most of the teachers were my parents in some way.
Yeah.
There was nothing I did that my parents didn't hear about.
Absolutely.
They always heard about it.
Yeah.
So there were so many eyes on me, and I will never forget the time when a teacher, I did something, and I was asked to explain, and I explained it halfway to where I explained it from where I did right and stopped.
You stopped where you said everything wrong.
And of course, they saw through it immediately. And then one of them called me, she mentioned Abraham, right? And used it to tell me the value or the vice of a half lie. I'll never forget.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. So those guys were not just teachers; they were parents in their own way too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they were parents.
On honesty, Obi was telling us a story from his naughty days growing up, and the subject of honesty came in.
Yeah, that's very critical because again, we'll bring about the principle of age 14. If you've not learned honesty as a value system, if it's not been ingrained in you before that age, you will always believe that you can always argue your way or lie your way into freedom or into not being punished, but it's only when you are that young. And every parents need to understand that every child, out of fear, that lying, dishonesty comes out of fear. The fear of, I'm going to be punished. I'll tell you a story about my little baby. We have a challenge with her about eating, and one day she just brought an empty plate. I finished.
Yeah.
And then I went to the trash can and I saw the thing there. She had poured the thing away and said she's finished. Because of the way the mom will frown at her where every time she doesn't finish the food, and then she will now be fed, And then she poured the thing away and brought the empty plate and finished. And when I saw it, she saw, the anger on my face. And I said, go face the wall. I've never done that to her before. I said, she should go and face the wall. And she faced the wall. As she faced the wall, I was feeling the pain. I wanted to release. I said, no, but this girl needs to learn that this is not the way to go. And I've spending some time there, and then I called her. And I told her, it is not good to lie. If you didn't finish that food, I will understand. It would have been better for you to come and tell me that I can't finish it rather than lying. Lying is, we have to paint that line because that is how, an adult later in life at age 35, age 40, we know because facing the wall now, growing up, you might tell her maybe at age 10, today it might be facing the wall, tomorrow it might be jail. By lying. And then that registers. Because facing the wall is removing her freedom. Right? Taking her away from what she would have loved to be doing at that particular point in time. That growing up in life, that might actually be jail. And then she understands that. Nobody wants to go to jail. But having said that, punishment must come in an atmosphere of unconditional acceptance. Right? That parents don't punish. Parents have a responsibility to create the environment of unconditional acceptance. Right? So that when punitive measures are meted out, They know that this is not rejection. Because the moment a child can feel rejected, that child forever will walk with a limp. It can never be a well-rounded child. So it's, and that's why even society at large, in maybe in many Western countries, they no longer call, jailhouses prison. They are called corrective centers. It's still to remind us of what happens back in the family level. That when you punish, it is corrective, never punitive. It is corrective. So that reminds us that that's the way it ought to be. But many jailhouses, especially in Nigeria, where jailhouses, people come back, more criminalized. They come back more angry with society. It begins with the family. There's something. So honesty can only be taught. The person that pilfers the national treasury, state treasury, local government treasury, they have learned to get away with dishonesty while they were young. So when we are talking about a society where impunity reigns, back from home, people have gotten away with lying, with not doing things according to set standards. So that's another critical building block of those values. Honesty. Honesty. This is what, and then being able to come clean with something you've done wrong. So lying, if it has not been criminalized, so to say, from home, it becomes something that is acceptable. I remember when I was working in the bank, you are maybe like a suspected accomplice to a fraud. I tell you, this is something that happened. They took some of my friends to detention because of a fraud that happened. They were just suspects, not that they have been. And then they got to the prison, they put them in the cell, and they came back to tell the story that they told the guys there that, well, if you go to cell, the inmates ask you what happened. Yeah. You tell them the story, and they said, and this guy said he told them that they stole 5 million naira from our bank, and I didn't know about it. He said they nearly killed him. They stole 5 million naira in your bank, and you don't know about it. How come you don't know about it? Their crime was that they are not part of the stealing. You see, that's how society has been structured. Yeah. It's because back from home, we've allowed lying, dishonesty to go unpunished. You never let it go unpunished, regardless of the level of punishment. But people need to learn from childhood about the consequences of bad actions.
Absolutely. I have this little story. One time I traveled, and Ryan was 11 at the time. So I was doing the dishes in the kitchen, and Ryan came and then, took the sponge from me. And I told him, don't worry, I'll wash it for you. He just finished eating. He said, no, I don't want to do the time. No, I don't want to do the time. I didn't know what that meant, So later on, I heard his mom saying, you know what we say here, as you know what we say in the house. Then he mentioned it. If you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime, And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, seriously. And he did not, because he knows his mom will probably ask him, did you do your dishes? Exactly. He didn't know what would happen if he said, no, I gave it to Auntie Sandra to wash, So I was really impressed, you know.
And again, doing the time also is different from child to child. Parents need to understand that. I tell the story of two brothers who one likes to just stay in his room and be alone. Another one loves to be with every other person watching TV. If you think you are punishing Ray by locking Ray up in the room, you are not punishing Ray. Because that's where Ray wants to be. Right? Dennis loves to be in the company of everybody. If you put Dennis in the room, that's when you punish Dennis. If you want to punish Ray, bring Ray out of his room to come and stay with everybody. That's torture. He wants to be in the room, read a lot of books. But Dennis is the relational one. So what works for Ray is not what works for Dennis. So parents also need to understand that. Okay. I think we're going to parenting here, but it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. But during the time, those kind of narratives need to be inculcated. The principle we are trying to share here is this. There's a time when some vital lessons of life can no longer be learned. If we miss that particular season, because there's a time to talk to your children, there's a time to talk with them.
Your children, yeah.
If you are talking to them, when you're supposed to be talking with them, that rebellion comes in.
Saying all of this, I realized that it's very, very key that the parents not only just teach these values to the kids, the parents are also supposed to actually model these values.
Absolutely.
Now, looking back at what happened, some time back at the National Assembly where the gates were locked.
Oh my goodness.
And then, we saw fathers scaling the fence, scaling the gates.
There was even another instance where they were beating themselves up in the chambers and there were kids in the gallery looking down.
Wow.
Yeah. What people see registers much more than what they hear. Especially for children, one thing I would say is that the children of those guys who scaled the fence, I don't think they are surprised. But the tragedy of that is that they have come to see that as normal. Another story of a girl who was going to marry, they went out and something happened, there was an argument, and this girl slapped the would-be husband. They took this girl in for anger management therapy. And she said that, well, that's the way my mom treats my dad. So the place of modeling is very, very key. And I tell, couples that one of the blessings of children is not just that you have a child, is that you now have a reason to do some things right. Because somebody is watching. Like I always say it for myself, that when I walk, I hear footsteps behind me. So that sort of shaped me. There are some things I will want to do that I will not do because I consider those who might be looking at me. A particular person who really wanted to be in public office and it didn't happen. He was a military man in the days of military era. He wanted to really he wanted to be a governor, and he never worked for this couple. The husband never became a governor, And then later when the military, the civilian took over, this lady came back to me and said that, that she's so glad that the husband never became a governor. Because by this time they've retired, all of them. Some of them were in detention. And all the kids of these soldiers, they attend the same school. So that today that the kids came back home and they were making jest of those whose parents were in detention. That your father is a thief. Your father he said that they couldn't say that to his kids. That it means the whole world to her. You see, we need to know that a lot of things we do, we don't know the kind of modeling we are giving to somebody. Because I said, you don't know that guy, that lady under your roof, who is 5 years old now. He might be depressed, might be a senator tomorrow. But if your child sees you scaling the fence, I think I'll just stop there because I can really, it's really, it's the height of it.
Okay. This has been very, very interesting, and I'm sure the listeners out there can say the same. Children observe more than we know, and it would be best if we model, the things that we try to teach them, model it more than just, mouthing it to them. Yeah. Thank you. Obi Brown, Matthew, it's good to have you here. I hope you come by the next episode. And Dr. Reju, thank you for being on the program today. We'll be back next week, still on the series on the family. Join us again on Answers with Dr. Reju, where critical life issues are clarified.